My father demanded I give my dead mom's house to my pregnant stepsister, but when they tried changing the locks while I was at work, I called the police and exposed them legally. I'm 28 years old, I work in accounting for a mid-sized company, and what happened last year with my family still has me messed up. I mean, not messed up, but it definitely changed the way I see my dad and his new family. About 5 years ago, my mom died, pancreatic cancer. It was horrible. I don't even want to talk about it because it gets me down. But the important thing is that my mom left me her house. It was a house she had bought on her own, with her money, working double shifts as a nurse for years, and in her will she made it very clear that the house was for me, only for me. My dad had already remarried by then, like 2 years after they got divorced, and he was living with his new wife in another part of the city, so it wasn't even like he needed the house or anything. The house is nothing special, you know. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a small yard in a quiet neighborhood. But for me, it's everything. Because every time I walk through that door, I think about my mom, painting the walls, fixing the garden on Sundays, buying that ugly lamp in the living room that I hated. But now I can't even think about changing. It's my house, my refuge, my connection to her. After she died, I moved in there permanently, sold my apartment, and used that money to pay off some college debts and to fix a couple things in the house that were kind of old. The first few years were hard, living there alone with all the memories. But eventually, I got used to it, and I'd even say I found peace in that space. My dad and I were never super close after the divorce, but we didn't have a bad relationship either. You know what I mean? It was more like neutral. We'd see each other at Christmas, at some birthday. His new wife, who I'm going to call stepmom because honestly, I don't want to put her real name, was always kind of cold to me, but I thought it was just her personality. You know, some people are like that. She had a daughter from a previous marriage, Taylor, who was like 20 when my dad married stepmom. Taylor and I never had a sibling relationship, obviously. We were practically strangers who saw each other at awkward family dinners where nobody really knew what to talk about. Things started getting weird about a year and a half ago. Taylor, who was 25 by then, got pregnant by her boyfriend Cameron, some guy she met I don't know where. I think at a bar or something. At first everything seemed fine. Cameron was excited, Taylor's family was happy. My dad called me all proud saying he was going to be a grandfather and I said something like, "Oh, that's great. Congratulations," without thinking much about it because, honestly, it didn't affect me directly. But then around 4 months into the pregnancy, Cameron disappeared, like literally ghosted her, changed his number, moved out of the city, and left Taylor alone and pregnant. It was heavy. I'm not gonna lie. I felt bad for her at the time. Because that's horrible. Nobody deserves that. Taylor moved in with my dad and stepmom, obviously because where else was she gonna go? And that's where this whole mess started. Turns out my dad's house only has 2 bedrooms, so Taylor was sleeping in what used to be like a study or office, and with the baby coming, they started realizing that space was going to be super tight. I thought, well, they'll have to make it work. Lots of people live in small spaces with babies. It's not ideal, but it's doable. But apparently, they had other plans. One Sunday, my dad called me and said he needed to talk to me about something important, asked if I could come to his house. I said yes, thinking maybe someone was sick or something serious. So I went that same afternoon. When I got there, all 3 of them were sitting in the living room. My dad, stepmom, and Taylor, who was already like 6 months pregnant, and it showed. They offered me coffee, awkward small talk about work and weather, and then my dad dropped the bomb. He said, "Jacob, we need to talk about your house." And I said, "Okay, what about my house?" And he basically explained that Taylor needed a bigger place for her and the baby, that his house was too small, that I was living alone in a 3-bedroom house, and it wasn't fair that I had all that space while Taylor was about to have a baby without a proper room. I was like, what? Waiting for it to be a joke or something? But he kept talking. He said he'd been thinking that the most reasonable solution was for me to give the house to Taylor, that after all I was young and single and could live anywhere, that a small apartment would be perfect for me. Stepmom chimed in, saying it was the right thing to do. That family helps each other, that my mom would have wanted me to support my sister at a time like this. And Taylor was sitting there with a pouty face saying she really needed the house, that her baby deserved to grow up in a nice place with a yard and space. I think I was like 30 seconds without being able to speak because my brain wasn't processing what I was hearing. Finally, I said, "Are you serious? You want me to give you my house? The house my mom left me?" To Taylor. My dad said not to see it that way, to see it as helping family, that I could find another place easily. I said, "Dad, this isn't just any house. This is Mom's house. She worked her whole life to buy it. She left it to me specifically. I'm not going to give it away." Stepmom said I was being selfish, that a baby needs more than a single adult, that I should think about priorities. Taylor started crying, saying nobody supported her, that Cameron had abandoned her and now her family was too. I stood up and said, "This conversation is over. I'm not giving you my house, period," and I left. I drove back super angry, like my hands were shaking on the steering wheel and I felt like my head was going to explode. How dare they? Did they really think I was going to hand over my mom's house just like that? I called my best friend and told him everything, and he was shocked too. Told me they were crazy, that I shouldn't even think about giving in. I thought that was going to be the end of it, that they had tried and failed and that was it. But no. The next few days my dad called me like 5 times, left voicemails, sent texts, all with the same message. That I should reconsider, that I should think about Taylor and the baby, that my mom would have wanted me to be generous. That last part made me angrier because he had no right to speak for my mom. He left her. He married someone else 2 seconds later. He didn't know what my mom would have wanted. I did know what she wanted because she left me the house in her will, crystal clear. Then they started showing up at my house unannounced. Like, I'd come home from work, and there they were, at the entrance, waiting for me. The first time it was just my dad. He tried the conversation again. I told him, no. He left. The second time, it was stepmom with Taylor. They wanted to see the house inside, supposedly so Taylor could see how much space there was for the baby. I told them they couldn't come in, that it was my house, and they weren't invited. Stepmom told me I was being ridiculous. Taylor cried again. I closed the door. The craziest thing was, when I came home, one Wednesday, and there was a new crib in my garage, like a crib, still in its box. I called my dad and said, "What the hell is this?" And he said Taylor had ordered some things for the baby and needed a place to store them temporarily. I said, "We'll have her store them in your house, not mine." And he said they didn't have space. I told him if they didn't come pick up that crib in 24 hours, I was going to put it on the street. They came to get it, but with a super bad attitude. At one point, my dad showed up with a real estate agent, without warning me. They knocked on my door one Saturday morning, and when I opened, there they were. The agent introduced himself and said he was going to help me find a nice apartment at a good price. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" I looked at my dad and said, "You just brought a stranger to my house to pressure me. Seriously." He said he just wanted to help make the transition easier. I closed the door in their faces. I installed security cameras after that. 2 in the front, 2 in the backyard, 1 in the garage. I didn't trust that they wouldn't try something weird. And it was a good decision, because like 2 weeks later I'm checking the cameras from work and I see there are people in my house in the middle of the day. I shoot out of the office, drive like crazy, and when I get there my dad, stepmom, and some guy I didn't know were in my house. Inside, moving things. They had changed the locks. They changed the locks on my house. I almost lost it right there. I came in through the back door, which luckily they hadn't changed yet, and found them in the living room. I yelled, "What the hell are you doing in my house?" The guy turned out to be a locksmith they had hired. My dad said they were just trying to help, to prepare the house for Taylor. I pulled out my phone and said, "You have 10 seconds before I call the police if you don't give me the new keys now, and if you don't leave my property immediately." Stepmom started with how I was overreacting, that they were family. I yelled at them to change the locks back or I'd call the police for trespassing. They left. The locksmith changed the locks back, but the atmosphere was already super tense. I called a lawyer the next day. I told him everything and he told me that legally the house was mine without any doubt, that my mom had left a valid will and it had already gone through probate years ago. But then he told me something that made my blood run cold. He said my dad had gone to his office months earlier, before all this drama with Taylor, asking about the possibility of contesting my mom's will. The lawyer had told him there was no case, that the will was solid, but the fact that my dad had tried to do that destroyed me. It meant this wasn't something that had occurred to him suddenly to help Taylor. He had been thinking about taking the house from me from before. I confronted him over the phone because I didn't want to see him in person. I told him I knew he had tried to contest the will. There was silence on the other end, and then he started stammering excuses. That he had just been exploring options. That the house was too big for me alone. That he also had a right to some of what my mom had built. I told him he had no rights, that they had gotten divorced, that my mom had been very clear in her wishes, and that what he had tried to do was disgusting. He got angry, said I was ungrateful, that he was my father and deserved respect. I told him respect is earned, and he had lost mine. And I hung up. I reinforced all the security measures after that. Changed the locks to more secure ones, upgraded the camera system to a more sophisticated one with instant notifications on my phone, put up private property signs, basically turned my house into a mini fortress. My lawyer prepared documents certifying my absolute ownership, and we registered them in a way that any future attempt to contest the will would be documented as legal harassment. Taylor started posting things on social media. Things like vague posts about family that abandons you when you need them most, about selfish people who live in big houses while innocent babies have nowhere to sleep. She never mentioned me by name, but it was obvious. Her friends would comment things like, "You deserve better, people are horrible," and I'd be there watching everything thinking, really? Am I the bad guy for not giving away my inheritance? I blocked her eventually because it was affecting me mentally. Like 3 months went by without hearing anything from them. Total silence. I thought, well, finally they understood. They gave up. I can move on with my life. Then I found out through a distant cousin that Taylor had had the baby, a boy, and they were all living cramped in my dad's house just like I had imagined from the beginning. I felt bad for the baby, I'm not gonna lie, but it wasn't my responsibility to solve Taylor's housing problems. And then one Sunday, like 4 months after the baby was born, there was a knock on my door. I thought it was the mailman or something. I opened without looking through the peephole like an idiot, and there were all 3 of them. My dad, stepmom, and Taylor with the baby in her arms. The baby was asleep, all wrapped in a little blue blanket. Before I could say anything, my dad said, "We just wanted to give you one last chance to do the right thing. Look at your nephew, Jacob. This child needs a proper home." I felt a mix of rage and sadness that almost made me cry right there. I told them, "The baby is beautiful, seriously. But my answer is still no. This is my house and it's going to stay my house. Now please, leave." Taylor started crying, saying, I hated her son, that what kind of person refuses to help an innocent baby. Stepmom said, my mom would be ashamed of me. That made me really angry. I told them, don't mention my mom again, don't use her memory to manipulate me, and get off my property now. My dad tried to come in, like literally put a foot in the doorway, and I pushed him back gently but firmly. I said, if you don't leave in the next 30 seconds, I'm calling the police. He said, you wouldn't dare. I said, try me. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. Finally, they left, but yelling horrible things. That I was a monster, that they would never forgive me, that someday I'd need something from them and they'd remember this. I called the police anyway. Not to report them, but so it would be documented that they had been on my property after I had asked them to leave. The officer who came was super understanding, wrote everything down, told me if they showed up again to call immediately, and they would come. He suggested I consider a restraining order if things escalated further. I blocked them on everything. Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, phone, everything. I told the cousin who had been keeping me informed that I appreciated his concern, but I didn't want to know anything about that part of the family anymore. I also blocked some aunts and uncles and cousins who started sending me messages saying I was being too harsh. That family is family. All those cliché phrases people say when they don't really understand what happened. About 6 months ago, I threw a party at the house. I invited friends, people from work, people who really support me. We grilled meat in the backyard, played music, played board games in the living room. And at one point, while I was there, surrounded by people who really love me, I realized I had made the right decision. This house, this space, is mine. I protected it against people who tried to use emotional manipulation and guilt to take it from me. My mom left it to me because she trusted that I would take care of it, and that's exactly what I did. Do I feel bad for Taylor and the baby? Sometimes. Yes. Nobody chooses to get pregnant and be abandoned. But it's also not my responsibility to sacrifice my mom's inheritance to solve problems that other adults created. My dad and stepmom are adults with jobs and a house. They can help Taylor in 1,000 different ways without demanding that I give up the only thing I have left of my mom. They could have looked for a bigger apartment. They could have helped her apply for housing assistance. They could have done many things. But they chose the easy path, which was to pressure me, and when it didn't work, they got angry as if I were the villain of the story. My therapist, because yes, I started therapy after all this, told me something that stuck with me. She said that setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish, it makes you healthy. That saying no when something goes against your values and your well-being isn't cruelty, it's survival. And that sometimes family is the people who support and respect you, not necessarily the people you share blood with. I still live in the house. I still love every corner of this place. I changed some things, painted the guest room a color I like, bought new furniture for the living room, made the garden nicer with plants my mom would have loved. Every time I make an improvement, I feel like I'm honoring her memory more than if I had given in to my dad's pressures. I don't know if I'll ever forgive my dad for trying to take this from me. Maybe when I'm older and have more perspective, or maybe never. For now, I'm at peace with my decision, and that's enough for me. The house is still mine. The memories of my mom are still alive in every room, and I'm still the owner of my own life and my own choices. And honestly, after everything that happened, I think that's all that really matters.